When you live in a small community, it feels like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world. And that's what I felt when I was growing up in Hyderabad. I went to a small school where almost everyone knew each other personally, and all the friend groups integrated in a way that made us feel like an extended family. The friends that I had in my apartment building were the same ones that I'd hang out with at school and then play games with in the evenings. And what was great about it was the fact that we all had such similar personalities and interests that it became easy for us to get along. And it felt like our lives were contained in a sort of bubble. So when one day my dad told us that his work was moving us to Sri Lanka, it felt like that bubble had been burst. Now before moving, I did some research about what Sri Lanka is like so that I could make some assumptions about my new life and take comfort in it while I waited for summer to begin. But as soon as we got there, and really as soon as I stepped out of the airport, it felt like the image that I created in my head completely shattered. I remember my mom and I were so amazed at how clean the roads and the air was and how the country was so well developed while also being so in touch with nature. Perhaps the biggest culture shock was the fact that you'd always be greeted with a smile wherever you go, even if you were a stranger. Something that I'd also never seen before was the large number of foreigners and expats in my community, which is what I want to talk about today. In my school and in my apartment, I met people from all over the world, from countries that had previously felt so distant and far off. And 11-year-old me could only think of it as a really cool experience at the time, getting to meet so many different kinds of people. But looking back now, I can tell how important that was for me, which is why I wanted to share this with you. Now, I'm sure that at some point we all must have heard or read about how cultural diversity makes us more kind and open-minded and understanding. But there's so much more to it than that same old narrative, which is not to say that it's untrue, of course. Growing up in a more homogenous community meant that I had quite a few subconscious prejudices about other people. And one of the most beneficial aspects of this experience was getting there, meeting these people, and being proven wrong about my preconceived notions. And I'm sure this might be relatable to some of you having lived in other countries, no matter how briefly. In children, it also promotes a sense of equality and global awareness, as well as the ability to communicate despite cultural barriers. And another thing that people don't initially link to cultural exposure is becoming a better learner. To visualize this, think of your brain as a machine that processes information, right? And when you diversify the kind of input that goes into the machine, it naturally improves its processing capabilities to keep up with it. And an interesting example of this is seen in bilingual students, whose ability to speak multiple languages transfers into better pattern recognition and comprehension skills. International schools even use this link to give their students an advantage, and they get the advantage of global perspectives and different types of teaching and learning methods. This is just one reason why it becomes even more important at a young age. And if I were to talk about all the benefits for when you grow up, move out, go to college, and get a job, we'd be here for hours. So while some of this might seem familiar, for someone like me, it was quite a foreign concept. And even for those of us who are familiar with this, we tend to stick to interacting with the same kinds of beliefs and worldviews as us, which is evident in the friend groups that we have and in the kind of media content that we consume. And that's normal, right? Because that's what feels comfortable. But that's where applying what you know becomes more important, because even if I am aware that cultural exposure is good for me, do we ever really make effort towards it? And that's not just to say travel all the time and meet new people. Some of these things aren't under our control all the time. And I know that from experience. But like I said earlier, one of the main ways to do this is diversifying the kind of input that you get. From my experience and the experience of some of my other friends, I found that diversifying the kind of books you read and the movies and videos you watch, the cultural content that you consume, is the most important step for this. I'm a big reader, and for me personally, it's so beautiful to expand your range and see what authors of different communities have to say. And that's not just to say authors from different countries, but also political, social, and academic backgrounds. Film and music are an equally impactful way of interacting with other cultures, because each style, each genre, and each piece has its own history connected to it, which tells you a lot about different people in different times and places. This gives you more than just learning new things about other countries, and for my friends in the IB, who are definitely familiar with the learner profile, we become better inquirers and communicators. International mindedness doesn't just come from traveling, and there are so many more nuances to it that we can only understand once we take steps toward it. Which is why I wanted to share this with you and remind you of the importance to continue to push your boundaries. Thank you.